This week's Parashat Chukat, is a pivotal parasha in the book of Bamidbar. In this parasha, we have the transition from the first generation to the second generation. The book of Bamidbar, the book of Numbers as it's known, is about two generations, two censuses that are taken. First, in the beginning of the book, is the census of the people that left Egypt, the slaves who were freed and walked through the desert, but they don't succeed in moving into the land. They die in the desert. And the second census of chapter 26 is the census of their children, the generation that follows them and will enter the land. At what point in the book do we get a sense that the first generation has died and the second generation is emerging? And I would say that chapter 20 and the beginning of chapter 21. Chapter 20 begins with the death of Miriam and concludes with the death of her brother Aaron, the priest. And not only is Aaron's death recorded, but we're also told that the changing of the guard, as it were, the removing of the priestly vestments from Aaron and the dressing of his son is very significant, because that represents the changing of generations. And in the middle of that chapter, which is chapter 20, we're told the incident of Moses and the rock, something Moshe does, though it's far from clear what it is, results in God's telling Moshe that he and Aaron have sinned, that Moshe will not possess the land, will not enter into the land, because he was unsuccessful in sanctifying God's name. So in chapter 20, we have both the death of Aaron and Miriam and Moses' prophesied demise. So clearly, the three leaders, either death or prophecy of death, is foreshadowing, maybe even representing the fact that this generation will not possess the land. In chapter 21, the beginning of chapter 21, there's a little incident that might cast some light on this matter. The incident is that the Torah says that the Canaanite king of Arad, who dwelt in the south, heard that Israel was coming, and he attacked Israel and took captives. Vayishvi menu shevi. Vayidai Yisrael neder Hashem vayomar. When Israel, however, took a vow unto God and said, if you give me this king into my hand, if you allow me to be successful, I will utterly destroy their cities. And God hearkened unto Israel. Vayishva Hashem l'kol Yisrael vayiten et ha'Kanaani vayacharem etem v'yadareihem vayikrashem ha'makom charma. And the place of the victory was called Charma, which means destruction or complete dedication. And what's very striking about this little incident that takes place after chapter 20 is that we have the place Charma, place of destruction, mentioned earlier in the book of Bamidbar, but exactly in the opposite way. And that is the story that appears at the end of the spy incident in chapter 14, where a group of Israelites say to Moshe, despite the fact that you've told us we can't possess the land, we're going to go anyway and fight. Those are called the Mapilim. Moshe says to them, don't do it, God is not in your midst. Moses and the ark do not depart from the camp. And the Canaanite and the Amalekite, Akraniv Amaleki, came down from the mountain and defeated them ad Charma, till the place called Charma, destruction. That represents the end of the first generation's possibilities of possessing the land. And now we have the opposite. We have the victory in Charma. And what's in particular striking is how the victory comes about. In the first story, Moshe said that the ark and Moshe do not depart from the camp. They can't fight without Moshe and the ark. But in the second story, what's curious is that Moshe's name is not mentioned at all. It's Vayidai Yisrael neder. Israel took a vow. And the idea of taking a vow is they're not mentioning Moshe. They're saying, God, if you permit us to be victorious, we will destroy the cities. What this story represents is not just the beginnings of conquest, not just the successful conquest, not just the undoing of the defeat of Charma in the first story at the end of chapter 14, but in a deeper way, it's a victory brought about without Moshe's assistance. And that's the story of the second generation, which will possess the land without Moshe, but they're also ability to act on their own. After all, these were never people that were slaves. These were free people. They grew up in the desert. and they're able to make autonomous decisions, autonomous judgments. This represents, therefore, in the book of Bamidbar, a key turning point, a movement from the first generation of slaves that will not possess the land. And here we have a statement in the beginning of chapter 21 that this is a generation capable of possessing the land, a generation that grows up in the desert, a generation that were never slaves, a generation of free people. Shabbat Shalom.